What's going on, everybody? This is Clint with the Die Hard MMA podcast, and this is your post weigh-in recap for UFC Vegas 21. This is the best betting show for MMA gambling on the internet today. This is the undefeated post weigh-in show only at odds.com. Make sure you do me a favor, smash that like button, hit the subscribe if you haven't already. If you're new to the show, what we do is we talk about what these fighters look like on the scale. We get one last shot to see them before they step foot in the cage tomorrow, and I use my highly trained eye. I watch for little adjustments. I watch for wide open eyes. I watch for rapid blinking. I look for the balance. I see if anyone's fallen off the scale or having a hard time, and we try to use that little bit of body language to make one final adjustment on our handicap and try and snipe some last minute value. So let's look at what these fighters looked like today on the scales and see if we can pick out any spots to make a little extra cash for tomorrow's fights. First up, we've got Matheus Semelsberger taking on Jason Witt. Semelsberger came in at 169.5, and I didn't even recognize this man. He looks completely different, shaved his head, he's ripped up like I've never seen him before, absolutely shredded, incredible shape, he looked fantastic. Jason Witt came in at 171. He lost his balance just a little bit getting off the scale, and that was something that I always take into account, but he didn't waver once he got onto the scale. It seems like it might just be one of those things where he might have missed his footing. That happens. We don't want to read too much into these little body language tells. I want to have something else to back it up. So I was a little concerned with Jason, but after seeing him on the scale, not so much. This dude is thick, though. He's a grappler. He's got that beast barrel-chested body type for that. Striker versus grappler. We are ready to rock on this one. And size advantage for Matt. You know, he's a guy that came in, good, solid striking, heavy hands. Jason Witt, a guy that gets hurt on the feet basically every single time he's out there. But Matt, he's fought the lowest level of competition possible in the UFC so far, and he also gives up takedowns. This is a perfect spot. I've bet the under. This isn't a post-weigh and read. This is something I've tweeted out a lot earlier in the week. I like the under here. I think Matt either catches Jason Witt on the chin, knocks him out, or Witt gets this thing to the mat and ends up subbing Witt gets it to the floor and subs Matt. Sorry about that. Lost my tongue there for a second. I still like the under in this spot, and I keep ping-ponging back and forth as to who I think is going to win this fight. I think I'm going to side with the experience, and, last maybe fights are tomorrow. I could change my mind again. I'm going to say Jason Witt here. What we've got next is Gloria, Paula taking on Jinh, Frey. Paula came in at 115.5, and she looked good on the scales, no issues. She's still a relative newcomer, so I'm kind of feeling her out. Don't exactly know her mannerisms or anything like that yet. Jinh Frey, she looked fantastic. She is always in good shape. She's a little tank. She's always just absolutely shredded on the scales. When they faced off, Gloria had a big height advantage. We know she's going to have a read advantage, but Jinh Frey did not look intimidated at all, didn't back off. This is a spot I've decided to pass on. Neither of these women showed any weakness or anything like that on the scales. I don't think either of them had a problem or a bad weight cut, but they both present problems stylistically for the other. Whoever wins this fight is probably going to look like a minus 500 favorite because they are able to establish the game plan when their opponent wasn't able to. Next up, we've got Cortney Cast Iron Casey taking on Aldrich. Casey came in at 126, and she needed the box of shame. She didn't have it. She couldn't quite make the weight cut, and usually I take that as a bad sign. Usually I take that as a struggling weight cut. They couldn't quite get there, but you know what? Sometimes they just miscalculate a little bit, and this is what I think what happened. Casey looked good. She looked full. She didn't look sucked out. She didn't look like she was off balance. There were no real issues. She also has hair all the way past her butt. If she had just shaved off 2 inches of that thing, she probably would have made weight just fine. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Cortney Casey, even though she had a little bit of extra effort to get on the scale today. Aldrich came in at 125.5, totally normal. She looked a little relieved when they called the weight. I think maybe she was a little nervous about it, but a good face-off. These women size up well. I'm kind of leaning towards Aldrich. I like her striking game a little bit better. I think she wins this thing by decision, but I think it's also going to be close, and it's women's MMA, so you never know who's going to pull that armbar from guard out. This is not what I'm planning on betting on, but I'm going to lean Aldrich. Nasrat Haqparast is taking on UFC newcomer Rafa García. Nasrat came in at 156, and he knew he needed the box of shame right away. He called for it from the very moment he got up there. They went ahead and had him step on the scale anyway. Nope, got it back off. used the box of shame, and you know what? He looked fine. He made weight. He's another one of these guys that he knew it coming in. I think it was just tight, and he didn't necessarily want to cut any more weight, but he ended up making it all good there. Didn't give any other signs of me making to make me consider that maybe he had a bad weight cut or a hard time. Rafa Garcia came in. He looked thick. He looked solid, well muscled, great shape. Got on and off the scales with zero issues. This is a kid that I'm very interested to see what he can do in the cage. And they had an intense stare down. I mean, based on the numbers, when we look up the statistics for these fighters, I thought that Nasrat Haqparast was going to have a significant height advantage here to go with his reach, and they're the same size. I mean, Nasrat's got that gorilla arms thing going on where his arms are way longer than they have any right to be for his stature, but they were toe-to-toe. They were eye-to-eye. Rafa Garcia did not shy away size-wise from his opponent here, and I think we're in for a much better fight than people are expecting. I wouldn't suggest you parlay. I wouldn't suggest you lay that big chalk. I mean, Nasrat Haqparast is a battle-tested guy. We've seen what he's capable of in the UFC, but minus 400 might be sleeping on his opponent just a little bit here. Next up, we've got Rani Yahya taking on Ray the Judge Rodriguez. Yahya came in at 136, and one of the little things that I like to pay attention to is he brought his rehydration onto the stage with him. He didn't leave it with a teammate. He didn't leave it backstage. He felt he needed it, and he brought it up, and he set it down next to his clothes so that he could start rehydrating immediately after he got off the scale. And that's always something that I take as someone having a very tough weight cut because they know they need that rehydration. They know they need it immediately. He looked good once he got on the scale, but he did sit down in the chair to take all of his clothes off, which again, I may be nitpicking here, and some of you, I know, I can see the chat comments already. Who cares if he sits down? Nobody sits down to take their pants off. Trust me, I watch this thing every single week. Nobody sits to take their clothes off when they get ready to go on the scale. Rani Yahya plopped his butt down, took a little bit of a break while he was removing his clothing before he got on the scale. This is a fighter who's been in the UFC for 20 years. This is a guy who's been cutting, making this tough cut, draining his body every single time for even longer than that. He was in the WEC before he made it over to the UFC and had this illustrious 20-year career. He's 35 years old, but he's an old 35 years old, especially in fight mileage. I think Rani Yahya had a bit of a bad cut. Ray Rodriguez came in at 135.5, and he looked a bit tired, I'll be honest. He didn't look fantastic when he got on the scales. Physically, he looked fine, but he did look like he was a little out of it. He's a big guy for the division, so you kind of got to expect at least a little bit of that because the bigger fighters, they struggle a bit to get down and make that weight. When they faced off, we knew Ray Rodriguez was going to have a size advantage, so that didn't really surprise me any, but Yahya didn't look like he was ready to fight at all. He's not really a crap-talking or intensity type of guy, so doesn't surprise me too much, but with my read of him maybe having a bit of a tough weight cut, he still looked a little bit out of it to me on the face-offs. It was respectful. They're both good to go, and that one's going to be fun. I went ahead and took a stab on the dog. I also like to try to hit these ridiculously priced round 3 finish props when opponents have bad gas tanks and when they have bad weight cuts. Rani Yahya falls in both those categories for me. He slows down in round 2 in every single one of his fights, and if he had a bad weight cut, that helps us out even more. I've sprinkled on the Judge Ray Rodriguez round 3, and I think it's 22-1, so that's going to be a fun one if we can get that one home. Next up, we've got Charles Jourdain taking on Marcelo Rojo. Rojo, UFC newcomer. He was supposed to fight Hani Barcelos, and that was just a bad first step into the UFC. He's much luckier that he got this matchup here this weekend. As much as I like Charles Jourdain, he is no Ronnie Barcelos. Charles Jourdain came in at 145.5, gave a big flex, very excited, happy, smiling, and even though they're wearing masks, I love it. If you pay attention to the eyes, you can see the joy and you can see the smile, even though they've got their faces covered. He looked like he was excited and he's ready to go. I like this kid. Marcelo Rojo comes in at 145.5 as well. He was the first one to the scales, which always got to give whoever gets the credit for coming in first, prepared, ready to go, on time. I like it. He looked in solid shape. He looked good. I'm not expecting any issues or anything like that there. When they faced off, they were talking. Rojo was trying to get Charles Jourdain going. It was a good face-off, but Charles Jourdain has a significant size advantage, and that is something to me that factors in this fight quite a bit, because Charles Jourdain, being the bigger, stronger, more physical man, if he's dealing with a guy who, in my opinion, struggles in the grappling game, that's going to open up an avenue for Charles Jourdain. Rojo, he's coming up a whole weight class for this one. Most of his fighting career has been at 135. We haven't seen him for a full year. He's taken this long layoff. Now he's jumping up to 145 to take on a big kid like Charles Jourdain in this spot. I'm not a huge fan of the price tag. I don't like the minus 250 necessarily, but I have taken a shot on Charles Jourdain by submission. Unfortunately, I'm not the only one who found that. The line has come down a little bit. I was only able to snag it at plus 650. It was plus 800 earlier in the week in some places. I didn't have access. I'm putting a half unit on Charles Jourdain by submission at plus 650. I think these guys are going to brawl, and I think it's going to be a classic club and sub. Shout out to the club and sub podcast. Love you, boys. I think Charles Jourdain is going to go to war with Rojo. I think he's going to clip him, and eventually I think he's going to drop him, find his way to the back, or when Rojo decides to change levels and come in, Jourdain's got a sneaky guillotine on him. That submission prop is live, folks. I really like that spot here. Just a half unit shot, though. Plus 650 would be another fun spot to cash. Angela Hill taking on Ashley Yoder. Hill came in at 115.5. Looked good. Business as usual. Having fun. Ashley Yoder came in at 116, and she ran to the scale. She sprinted to the scale. She got on, looked excited, looked good, and then she literally leapt off the stage. I mean, this girl's got energy for days, and if you're worried about a bad weight cut, that ain't it. They got up, they faced off. We have seen this 2-3 times already. I just want this fight to happen. They had another hug, nice intense stare down, but it was all fun and games as soon as the stare down was over. And good to go here. I like this spot, and I don't think I'm going to touch it. I had a last-minute add-on last time where I took, I think, the under 2.5, where I played Angela Hill by knockout, something like that, because I thought Ashley Yoder coming in on short notice, maybe struggling a bit, having a bit of a bad weight cut. That didn't happen this time, and she definitely has all the energy in the world. This one's going to be a fun fight, and I'm not touching it from a betting perspective. Next up, we've got Eryk, ya boy, Anders coming in at 186. Darren the Dentist Stewart, 185.5. Great fight here. Maybe my most anticipated fight on the card here. Eryk Anders was absolutely shredded on the scale today. I talked about it on the Die Hard MMA podcast. I broke the news. He's headed on over to Fight Ready. That's the gym that brought us Henry Cejudo. And what they do to athletes' bodies, just physically, they're wizards. This guy is a monster. He's already a freak athlete as far as the UFC and MMA is concerned. But after Fight Ready got their hands on him, he has every single muscle in his body ripped and ready to go. He struggled on the scales his last time out. We actually made a post-weigh-in show read to bet against him in his last fight. It got pulled off the cards because the doctors deemed him unworthy to fight that weekend because of the bad weight cut. So we almost got away with one last time. Didn't quite get there, and this time we're flipping the script. We're betting on Eryk Anders. Darren Stewart came in at 185.5, and he's an absolute unit. I'm sorry. Like, we talk about how good Eryk Anders looked, but I gotta give Darren Stewart his credit. This guy comes in, built like a brick shit house every single time. I mean, he's always just in ridiculous shape. He gave a couple of different flexes, looking like a bodybuilder up there, enjoying himself. But when they faced off, this is another spot where, again, the stats, the numbers, sometimes they just aren't truthful. Eryk Anders is supposed to have a 1-inch reach advantage and a 1-inch height advantage. He's freaking huge. They get in there and they stand toe-to-toe. They face off with each other. Anders looks like he's 2 or 3 inches taller. Anders looks like he is broader. He's thicker. And that's saying something because, generally speaking, Stewart is the shorter, thicker fighter. It's hard to out-thick that kid. Anders out-thicks him. So this is a spot where I am all aboard the Anders train, and I've already got 2 units on him. I got in early at plus 165. If I wasn't betting him already, this would be a read. If I wasn't betting him already, the sheer size advantage, the shape that he's in with how good he looks, if you're on Stewart, I pray for you. And if you're not on either of these fighters, I would take a stab on Eryk Anders. I think he is live in this spot. I think he's being disrespected. And I think this line is way too wide. I'm looking forward to that fight because I've got 2 units on your boy, and we beat the big line move, which really, that's highly important. That's what it's all about. Manel Kape comes in at 125.5, taking on Matheus Nicolau, 125.5 as well. And both guys were absolutely stone cold confident when they got on the scales. This is going to be an excellent fight. I'm excited for this one. They sized up extremely well with one another. Kape got in close on Nicolau, but he didn't even flinch. I'm so stoked on this fight. So I've got 2.5 units on Manel Kape to win 2 units in this spot. I think he bounces back from his previous opponent, but I'll be honest, I know a lot of sharp and smart people that have taken Nicolau. I've talked about maybe betting the under 2.5 in this spot, but really when it comes down to it, what I'm considering doing is hedging a unit on Matheus Nicolau so I'm not overly exposed on Kape because this is a really tight fight. I beat the line move on Kape, but then money came in the other direction. It's driven it back down. Now you can get Kape anywhere from minus 125 to minus 145 around the internet today. Money coming in on Matheus Nicolau at this point. I mean, At this point, it's hard to hedge because I've missed out on the value on Nicolau. The money's come back the other way. So I might have to just kind of go down with the ship on this one. Honestly, this may be a good pass spot. I think that Nicolau is a hittable guy. Kape has a speed advantage, and because of that, they're absolutely going to go to war. Kape has a grappling advantage, I feel like, or wrestling advantage, sorry. Nicolau is a black belt. He's probably got the grappling advantage. So it's going to be wrestling versus BJJ. I always favor the wrestlers ever so slightly in those situations, and we are in the small cage, so I think that helps. Plus, with Kape being pissed off the loss he had not so long ago, I feel like this is a spot he may have targeted to get back in there and get his first UFC win. But again, I may be trusting a guy just a little bit too much, a little too early in his career. Not sure what I'm doing here. Again, maybe a pass for most people out there. If you want to roll with me and you can get Manel Kape somewhere in the vicinity of -120, maybe that's the way to go. But don't unload on it. I'm not liking my 2-unit spot here. I'll be completely honest. Next up, we have got Jonathan Martinez taking on Dangerous Davey Grant. Martinez came in at 136, and he looked pretty good, got on and off quickly. He's a little bit of an awkward guy, so he's one of those ones that I've made a mental note of, that when he looks a little off, it's not necessarily a bad weight cut. That's just kind of how he is. Dangerous Davey Grant got up there, and he was in excellent shape. Now, I do have to say that he wavered just a little bit when he was on the scale, but it was when he was giving his flex. Might have been one of those situations, again, where he held the position in the wrong spot, like he thought he was going to step off the scale, and then he went, oh, I have to flex, and kind of wiggled a little bit to get back where he needed to be for his photo op. So I don't think he had a bad cut or anything like that. And when they faced off, Martinez came in stone cold, and Davey Grant got up in his face. They went forehead to forehead, John Jones DC style. Luckily, there wasn't a brawl. Nothing broke out. Nobody lost their tempers. But Davey Grant is huge. Davey Grant is really, really big. And honestly, that's something that I wasn't expecting. I thought Davey Grant was going to be a little bit bigger. He's much bigger. And again, we're in the small cage, folks. In the apex, that matters. If we were in the big cage and you've got someone like Martinez who's fully capable of skipping around the outside, staying at distance, picking you apart, making this a point fighting match, that's, totally the strategy. That's a good place to be. But in the small cage, Davey Grant's going to have much more opportunity to back this kid up, get him up against the fence, make it nasty, make it a war, make it a battle. And we've seen he doesn't shy away from those situations. The other thing is, Davey Grant has only lost by submission. He's never lost by decision. He's never lost by knockout. He's only ever lost by submission. And Martinez is not a submission guy. This is a spot where I'm very, very tempted to fade the public perception and even fade my own perception. I'm very tempted to take the shot here on Dangerous Davey Grant because of that sheer size advantage and the grappling advantage that we're going to expect him to have here. The only problem is his age, and Jonathan Martinez comes out of a really good camp that we like. But Martinez also hasn't faced a whole lot of really high-level grapplers, and even the ones he has faced aren't nearly the size of Davey Grant. So it's a spot that I'm not quite sure what I want to do on. What I decided I'm going to do, at least for now, is I put a half unit on Davey Grant by submission. I know that sounds insane. I know that sounds crazy, but that's his bread and butter. That's how he gets fights done. That's how Davey Grant wins more often than not, is he manages to get his opponents to the ground, he chokes them out. He may be able to get Martinez down. I don't know if he actually gets the submission, but it's 18-1, folks. 18-1. We've got a spot here where we've got a guy who's bigger, who's stronger, who's more experienced, and we're in the small cage. His best path to victory is exactly the one that the bookies are saying will not happen. I got to take that shot. Crazy or not, I got to take that shot. Half unit on Davey Grant by submission at 18-1. Dan Ige coming in here versus Gavin Tucker. Ige 145.5. Gavin Tucker 146. For Dan Ige, business as usual, but honestly, he looked a little out of it. This is one of those spots that I took notice of. He looked a little tired. His face looked a little worn. His flex wasn't overly enthusiastic. I think that Dan Ige had a bit of a rough weight cut. Gavin Tucker, on the other hand, was cool, calm, confident. He gave a big flex, and he is in incredible physical shape for this one. When they faced off, Ige's got a slight size advantage, but it's not anything to write home about. This is a spot that I've kind of ping-ponged back and forth basically all week. Early on when this line opened up, I thought Dan Ige. I wondered why the line was so low. It didn't make sense. And then I kind of flipped over to the Tucker side after not pulling the trigger on Dan Ige when it was that low. And I've started to come around to the fact that, some of these fighters right now are just making that step up. I like to fade fighters that are taking their first big step up in competition. It's an angle I use with regularity. Lately, it hasn't been working out. These fighters have all been passing the tests. And I kind of think that's what we're dealing with here. You got to listen to the gut. And My brain told me I needed to bet Dan Ige at minus 120 when it was there earlier in the week. My brain told me that line is too low. You need to pull the trigger on that spot. And that spider sense on the back of my neck told me, don't do it, Clint. Don't touch that line. Since then, money has come in on Dan Ige, as you would expect, as it probably should. And I snagged plus 130 with Gavin Tucker. I think Tucker's going to be the better striker. I think he might even be the better grappler. I think this is going to be a close, hairy battle. And I don't even mind Gavin Tucker by decision. I think you can get that at plus 240. And if this is going to be a close fight that comes down to the wire, I don't mind that shot. The only reason I ended up playing this thing on the money line instead of taking the decision prop is because of the question I have about Dan Ige on the scale, because if he did have a bit of a rough cut, he's coming off of his fight with Calvin Kattar. He's been tough, he's been durable, he's not a guy that you can finish, but he took a hellacious beating in that fight against Calvin Kattar, and there's only so many of those that you get before that chin eventually cracks. So I'm not going to get fancy and chase the extra value here on Gavin Tucker. I'm going to play him straight. I got plus 130, even though it sounds like a big jump to get all the way up to plus 220 or so. It makes sense. If you want to take the decision prop, go for it. That might be the smarter way to do it, but I'm not getting fancy. I'm just going to take the dog here and look for the upset. Co-main event time, Misha Cirkunov taking on Ryan Spann, maybe my favorite spot on the card today. Here we go. Misha Cirkunov came in at 205, and he is in amazing shape, folks. Absolutely shredded. He does need to shave, though. He's got that body rug thing going on. Not that I can say anything. But Ryan Spann came in at 206.5. He was the last fighter to weigh in today. He missed weight. That's right, 206.5. He needed the box of shame, and I got to tell you, his eyes were sunken in. He looked completely drained. He came to the scale straight from the sauna. He still had the towel wrapped around his waist, and he was just absolutely wiped. They gave him 1 hour after the face-offs to cut that extra half pounds, and you know what? He did it. And you know what the best part about that is? That's my favorite spot to go against. That's my absolute favorite spot to hammer against, because you took everything out of yourself to make weight. You had a bad weight cut, you couldn't get it done in time, you took the extra amount of time, and you grinded yourself all the way down to as fine of a powder as you possibly could just to make weight. You know what? Misha Cirkunov, he was sitting in the back eating donuts. He was rehydrating. He was having his energy replenished while Ryan Spann was spending another 45 minutes in the sauna, terrorizing his body, putting himself through hell just to try to get that half pound off. That makes a massive, massive difference in the fight. When they fight tomorrow, I expect Misha Cirkunov to be a much, much more refreshed version of himself. And Ryan Spann already has bad takedown defense. If he's got a bad gas tank and he's tired to go with that, he is in trouble. Now, my favorite spot on this card by far was the under 1.5 in Cirkunov versus Spann. I said that a long time ago. I've already bet that spot. I like that spot here now, even though it's a little bit priced, but I'm going to go ahead and put 2.5 units on Misha Cirkunov at minus 125 to win 2 units. He was the side I leaned to from the get-go. I was a little spooked on Ryan Spann. I was a little bit nervous of Ryan Spann because Cirkunov is a good hammer and a bad nail. I usually try to avoid those situations because if the tables get turned, he may cover up and not recover. But he's in better shape. He's in better condition. He had no problem making weight. His opponent had an issue making weight. His opponent has bad takedown defense. I mean, all of these things have piled onto each other to let me know that Misha Cirkunov is the side that I need to be on. I was this close to pulling the trigger before the weigh-ins on Misha Cirkunov. That sent it home. I'm going 2.5 units on Misha Cirkunov to win 2, and I think he gets it done by submission. Main event time, Leon Edwards taking on Belal Muhammad. Edwards came in at 170.5, and this guy's just in amazing shape. He's got an unreal body type, just beautiful genetics for this man. Congratulations, Leon. He looked confident, gave a big flex on the scale. Belal Muhammad came in, great shape as well, 170 flat. He did the motion for the belt around his waist there. And when they faced off, Leon is huge, folks. We knew Leon was going to have a size advantage, but this is drastic. Like, he was much bigger than Belal when they faced off. Now, to Belal's credit, he didn't flinch. He's got that little dog syndrome thing. He was intense, and he tried to get up in Leon's face, but to be completely honest, Leon completely dismissed him. It was one of the coldest things I've ever seen. One of these fighters is trying to get fired up. One of these fighters is trying to push the issue, let his opponent know he's not going to budge, and he just got waved off. Leon didn't give him the time of day, and it wasn't a cocky son of a bitch type of situation. I think Leon truly just believes that Bilal is not on his level, and that speaks to me. I am trying to find a way to bet Leon Edwards here. He's minus 275 at this point, and I've always said this whole week, I've talked about it, I think the size is going to be the difference. I think the strength of Edwards is going to be too much for Bilal to handle. And we've got a 5-round main event fight. That's where Leon really shines. That gas tank really comes into play. And you just can't overpower this guy for that long. So if Bilal is in this thing, it's going to be early. I think Leon Edwards takes it, and I'm very, very tempted to actually take a sprinkle on Leon Edwards round 3, 4, and 5 because his striking is very underrated. It's come a long way. This is a quick turnaround for Bilal, and Dana White has promised Leon Edwards that if he impresses, he gets that next title shot. That's something that Leon has been hunting his entire life. If he goes out there and decides I'm finishing Bilal Muhammad so that I finally get my crack at the belt, I think that's on the table. Now, unfortunately, I think the bookies understand that's on the table as well because, surprisingly, Leon Edwards by knockout is only plus 300. I expected it to be in the round plus 500 maybe, plus 450, something like that. So plus 300 is a little bit short. Leon Edwards by decision at even money kind of makes some sense because Bilal is a very, very tough guy to finish, but he has been knocked out before. I'm liking Leon Edwards a lot here, and I'm trying to figure out if I want to parlay him with somebody maybe on the next event, or if there's a spot that I like on this card that I might want to parlay him with. Maybe even just bodying up and laying the big chalk on the favorite that absolutely deserves that spot, and I might be taking a sprinkle on that KO prop. That's the post weigh-in show, folks. Those are the post weigh-in reads. If you have any questions or anything, hit me up on Twitter at DieHardMMAPod. If you want to see what I've actually pulled the trigger on and made for bets this week, that's where you'll find them. Do me a favor, subscribe here to Odds HQ. Your support means the absolute world to us. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Without you, we wouldn't be here doing what we do, bringing you the best sports betting content on the web today. You all have a great day. Good luck on all your action, and let's roll.